Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about working in a changing market. I'm with Randall Costa, and we're going to have a panel discussion after we kind of review a little bit of the information that we prepared for this. It seems like right now that we're definitely in a changing market. We don't know exactly where it's headed at this point, but there are some different things you need to do in a different marketplace. And so I'd like to start by talking about sellers. And we've been in a market where pretty much you'd want to take about any listing you could get because it would sell. And in a different market, that's not always the case. Not all properties will sell. When I started in the business in the early 90s, we would have 10, 12 listings at a time. You would expect that 50% of them would sell. It would take 6 months to sell. Once you got an offer, you would sit down and do the disclosures because you didn't want to waste your time on all these properties that weren't going to go anywhere. And so, I made a lot of money in that marketplace. And I think a lot of us that have been through different markets realize that you can make money in virtually any market. It's very important to understand seller motivation, much more so than it is in this market. Are they really, really wanting to sell? Are they going to put the price where it needs to be? Will they reduce if they need to? Are they going to do the prep work, that kind of stuff? And you also need to be very careful with your expenses, because if you're in a market where not everything sells, you don't want to be fronting all of this money on all these listings and then just end up not being able to recoup it. So those are some of the main things with sellers that...
Well, when you know to understand seller motivation, it's really critical to talk with them and find out exactly why it is that they want to do it. Because if you've got an unmotivated seller, then
you got a problem.
Like Matthew says, do you want to take the listing?
That's right. The buyers, as the market shifts, are going to be a little more value driven. Right now, it's like you win by getting into property, but you would start to see a lot more negotiating based on inspections and condition of property. And that's all fine. You just have to be prepared for it. And for those of you who've never been in a different market and never been through a lot of buyer negotiations, there's a lot of people in your office that have, and certainly a lot of the management team has as well. So I encourage you to get boned up on this.
We already started.
I'm going to see for you right here.
You're already on camera.
Right there?
Yes.
Yeah,
you're in the hot last one here.
You're in the hot seat. Oh my God.
Just because you're late, you're in the hot seat.
I haven't been prepared for this. I know you said thank you for your...
You're prepared.
The
Your
questions are in
experience
front of you.
prepared you.
Okay.
So one of the most important things in a different market when you have sellers is you have to have something that you're doing every single week and calling them every week. It seems kind of silly, but we've been in this market where you put it on the market, it sells in 2 weeks, you're done. But
maybe,
yes, exactly. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4. But if you're talking about something where it might take much longer to sell, you've got to actually plan out and have certain things. I remember I had everything from calling the buyer's agents in the neighborhood on week 3, and then I could say I did that. Or you'd run it back in the day. You'd run the Real Estate Times ad in month 2, or alternated, or we would do open houses every other week just so we'd have something. And if you had 1 or 2 people show up, it was a rousing success.
In the current market, a lot of agents have had to spend time making sure that the buyers are well communicated with, because the buyers could be months and months before they find a property that they want to buy. But when a market shifts and it becomes more of a buyer's market, then you have to shift that communication so that you're communicating with sellers and you're letting them know why it's taking and what it's so long and what it is that you're doing to retain their trust that you're doing a great job for them.
Right.
And it's good to do some of that up front.
Absolutely.
When you're setting
Set the
expectations.
Yeah,
absolutely. Very important. Pricing is critical. So if we're assuming that we're kind of at the start or in the middle of some kind of a change, it's going to be very important to keep your eye on the sale to list price ratio from the MLS as that changes, because it will start to change. We haven't been using as much expired and withdrawn listings when we sit down to talk with our buyers and sellers, but back in the day, we would be talking about all those, because here, this one was at $1 million, and it's a little nicer than your property, and it didn't sell. So we're not going to get over $1 million. So incorporating those into your reports and into your dialogue with your clients is going to become important again.
And I can also remember a time when you bring a CMA to the table with a seller, and you're paying attention to the expireds and withdrawals because they show what didn't sell, but then you are also making much more use of the active listings, because if there's 10 active listings and we know that 2 and 10 are going to sell and the others are not, then where do you need to be priced? You need to be priced competitive with those 2, not with the whole 10.
I think what a lot of people forget is that pricing strategy is actually still somewhat similar in that it is where you place it in comparison to what else is on the market. Yeah. It's still even, I think, more critical to be priced correctly.
Yes.
In a market that's either shifting or that's gone down.
By correctly, you mean, I think, where the sellers will accept the offer.
Where the sellers will accept the offer, but also what's realistic out there too.
Versus like listing it low, expecting it to go up.
Exactly, yeah. But exactly. Being very realistic with the sellers, but also having that conversation ahead of time with them saying, this is what to be prepared for. Whether it's a price reduction, whatever it may be. So you've had that conversation well ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be having conversations at the listing appointment about, okay, if we're on the market and it's been 3 weeks and everyone's got their buyers through, we're going to need to be looking at least a 5% price reduction at that point. So hopefully we won't need to get there, but just for parity, that's where we may end up needing to be.
But on that note, when we're pricing, I think at least I am shifting towards that now, is like, you know, this is what I would expect the bottom line price would be, you know, for it to sell at. So maybe we go there, you know, versus that, you know, in the market in the last couple of years where I would go, you know, below where I think it would go, in, you know, maybe 200 or so. I don't know. It would be dependent on the listing. And with the expectation we would get, you know, 5, 6, you know, offers and it would shoot up. I don't know that we can expect that.
Well, and
I'm not seeing that.
We certainly can't communicate that to our sellers that you can expect multiple offers.
Exactly.
You can expect that it's going to go way higher than what we've listed.
And that's why you don't price it this way, because they're asking, at least my experience is they're asking that question. Well, shouldn't we, you know, list it for, if I think it'll sell for 1.4 as an example, well, shouldn't we list it for 1.2 so we get the people in there and get multiple offers? And I said, well, that may happen or it may not. You can't expect that in this kind of a market.
I think it's really important, like this is what we're going through right now, is for the buyer's agents to also communicate with the listing agents to see where they are as far as how did they price this property, so that they can educate the buyers about, because some buyers are still in the mindset that these prices are going to go way up. And if you're a listing agent that has priced it at a point where you feel like that's what your clients are going to accept or a little bit more, then it's important to communicate that with the buyers who are coming through. And how do we do that? If, you know, it's important to do that as an agent, I think, in a way that's,
you mean with the buyer's agent? With the buyer's agent.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, you still want your buyers to get the best and highest price. So you don't want to, you know, it's a fine line.
Yeah.
You know, when you're representing a seller and wanting to get the best price, and then how do you communicate that to the buyer's agents in a way that's fair for everyone?
So one thing I know for sure is that segments of our market have absolutely shifted already. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about a nice single family in West Portal, it's still hot. You know, mm-hmm. it's like you're operating like you have been for the last year or so. It's probably fine. If you're listing a live-work loft that's, you know, one of the more cookie-cutter newer constructions on a back alley in Soma, or you're in the high-rise in South Beach, that market is already softened. Yeah. And so the stuff that we're talking about now are the things that you would be doing today in those markets and in the future as it continues to shift, which we think it probably is going to.
Right.
So that we talked a lot about sellers. There's buyers too. So I mean, there's stuff that we haven't really had to deal with because interest rates have been low and it's been cheap. But you know, back in the day, you know, every time the interest rates go up, it's more expensive. The payment's more expensive. So we used to do things like have the seller pay points to pay down that rate so that it's more affordable for the buyer, and that ends up attracting. You would actually advertise that in the 90s. You would say, hey, your buyer's going to pay 2 points, and guess what? The seller's going to buy a home warranty too. They did that a lot. And the stock market right now is tough because it's so volatile. But you know that's going to affect the buyers. You have to be careful. I think even today, if your buyer's taking their money out of the stock market for the down payment, they probably should be doing that very early or before they write the offer, because we have seen, unfortunately, too many transactions where they get into escrow, they haven't done it, the Dow goes down 800 points, and they get out of the deal, So it's important.
And if they're beyond contingencies, they may be losing their deposit.
That's right, absolutely. Buyers tend to be a lot more critical of properties when there's more selection and in a slower market. So, if it's got some negative, it gets magnified. No parking gets magnified. Being on a busy corner, on a busy street. I saw a property this weekend in Pacifica, and it looked perfectly lovely, but you walk in and you're staring at the whir of the traffic from 3 of the rooms, and like, no one's going to buy that. They're going to buy the one across the street. It's quiet. So it just all makes...
Or they'll buy it at a much different price.
Or a much different price. You're absolutely right.
I think some of the other factors that are often they impact the desirability of the property, and no yard, if there's no yard.
Yep.
A single family.
If there's no parking, if there's, that's right. If
I don't think no parking with condos anymore is as, at least in the city,
you may be right.
is as relevant as it used to be. Because so many of the younger buyers today, they don't have cars. They don't care.
And they're willing to look at properties that are less costly without parking.
Yes.
And get
Doesn't
a
mean as
better
much to
deal
them.
without the parking
Good
because
point.
they don't care about it.
Absolutely. Oops.
So much respect.
So much for that. The other thing that's going to happen, especially even right now, like if you're looking at Soma South Beach, Liverclaw, you may be able to go in and write an offer under the asking price and get it accepted. We're starting to see that a little bit more. So it's almost like you've got to shift your mindset based on what you're looking at, what part of the city, what property types. I think you'll see, if the market shifts, you're going to see the differential in pricing between TICs and condos grow. I know back in the 90s to early 2000s, it was about 18%. And it's nowhere near that right now. The TICs are trading at much closer to a condo price.
Right.
So those are all sorts of things that you're going to start to see. With that, I'll pass it off to Randall to ask our esteemed panel some questions here.
Well, before we actually jump into the questions, I thought maybe I would give everybody who may be tuned in and watching this some idea of who we've got here.
Excellent.
Everybody in this panel has been through the dot-com bust of the 1990s, and they've also been through the financial meltdown after 2008.
And the early 80s.
And I don't go back that far.
Not 80s. That was before you were born, I know. Which was the only way you could sell something when interest rates were 16%.
Susan, when did you come into the marketplace?
And I got my license in 79.
79, okay.
Yeah.
When Zephyr, the year Zephyr was
And
born.
believe it or not, I'm still alive. Yeah, well, Zephyr was in existence.
So you've been
I
through
was at
at least
another office.
3 downturns in the marketplace.
Yeah,
I've been through 2 of them.
Yeah.
Nadia, how about you?
I've been in the market I've been with Zephyr for 30 years now. I'm celebrating my 30th. So it's been a while, and I've been through all the different cycles and different trends. And I was around when we had the earthquake, and that was,
Yeah.
an interesting time, because I feel like as bad as it was, and the people were migrating to other places outside the city and off, businesses and all, the market did not go down more than 10% during that time, between 89 and 92. That's the lowest it went. So this is what
If you're going to be in a market that's shifting, you want to be in the San Francisco market. It's a great market.
Yeah, exactly.
Ken, tell us.
I'm the rookie of the trio here. I've only been here 22 years.
You are.
So yeah, not through the 89, but through certainly the .com and especially 2008, 2009. Yeah, and it's, all those times I just recall so much of keeping things moving with clients was certainly very much about communication and just kind of brutal honesty about what was going on at the time.
Some people are fearful that realtors who talk to the press are influencing the marketplace, and that they're creating a market shift. I don't know how much that's true. But I also know another fact about, at least in my mind, about realtors is that sometimes realtors are in denial about the change in the marketplace.
That's true.
And so it's important to try to assess all the information and to be prepared for whatever the market might do, because we can't predict. And sometimes I've said that, realtors know when there's been a market shift, and consumers know when there's a market shift, because it happened 6 months ago. And we have a tendency to deny that it's happened. But I would like to go around and hear what you have to say about where do you think the market is headed and what do you think is happening in the marketplace?
Sure. Yes, in my opinion, just from the last couple of downturns, I've seen a few, I think, fairly obvious indicators, and that was actually based on certain neighborhoods and segments of the market. And it was very typical through both the dot-com bust and 2009-ish that we started to see south of market lofts, TICs, high-end condos again. The upper end of the market really sagged first. And probably for a good 6 months to a year, I think. And then it started to affect other parts of the market. And we've seen some of that lately, although I think it's a little different because interest rates are still historically low. And there still appears to be a lot of demand in most of these other neighborhoods longer than the last couple of times I've seen a bit of a sag, including, Sunset, Borough Heights, West Borough, Noe Valley, although there's been some depreciation. I think things have actually gone down a bit in Noe Valley too. I also saw a number of listings being taken by agents from outside the region that you didn't see before, and they were willing to take listings at any price. And we started to see some of that again, where we're seeing, I think, I don't know statistically what it looks like, but it appears to me that there are more brokers from outside San Francisco that are taking listings here.
Nadia, what are you seeing?
Well, I have seen the market come to an adjustment in the last year. I think it started last January. And I feel like, I'm thinking of it very positively, and I think that this adjustment is good for many reasons, especially for buyers. They've been out there sweating and really working hard and thinking, okay, I'm going to sit back and wait and see. But I feel like it's important to keep our heads up and be very educated about what's going on and educate both buyers and sellers right now in a way that you have to bring the spirit up and be optimistic and really get these buyers into properties when they weren't able to get into them in the last 2 or 3 years, and think about who you are and how you're going to do that, and convince them that this is a good time for them to buy, because we really don't know what's going to happen in the future. Of course, none of us know what's going to happen, but with interest rates being the way they are right now, and if they have a good job and some security, I think we need to work on that with them. It's been very easy to work with sellers, but now we have to put our energy towards buyers and still educate the sellers about this adjustment so that they don't have high expectations. But I feel we'll get through it, and I think we just have to really work a little harder at it and hang in.
Susan, what do you think of the marketplace?
Well, I think each, having been through 3 downturns at least, one thing I will say is each downturn has a different nuance or reason for it. The dot-com bust, I thought, happened very quickly. Very quickly. It was almost overnight. And what we saw were short sales. And I don't think we're going to see that in this downturn. We're not going to see that dramatic a shift. I think the shift that I experienced anyway, or saw, started basically at the latter half of 2018. That's when I noticed. And the shift was just a whole lot more inventory on the market than I had seen in a long time. So that was like, okay, these buyers have way more to choose from. And I think that's one of the reasons we started to see more of a shift, because there was just a lot more for them to choose from. So the market for the sellers was not as competitive, in terms of numbers of offers. So that was the shift for this downturn. And I think that's what we're going to see this year. We're going to see a lot more inventory, I think, than we normally see. So again, buyers are going to have more choices, which again goes back to as always, it's crucial at this point, much more so than before, to price your property correctly. So it looks.
Can't repeat that enough.
You just can't. It's important. And it's like, so I think the choice you have in this market, at least this is what I'm doing, is because I have 2 listings coming on pretty soon. And this was a conversation I had with both sellers was, where do we price this? This is what's happened in the past. But now I think we have to, let's go to the comps, especially with condos. I have 2 condos, so the comps are a little easier with those in a sense. And really look at those within the last, I'd say 4 months, because those are the best comps to look at, I think. And then, do we price it where it is, where we think, it should go, versus this, this game of which we played in the past a lot, and worked fine, of pricing it low, hoping it'll go up. I just don't feel that comfortable with pricing that way right now. I'd rather price it where I think it'll sell. And the agents that have called me asking me, well, why did you price? They do ask me, why did you price it this way? I said, here's the comps. And this is what, this is what my sellers want.
So you touched on one thing about the nature of the different downturns. Mm-hmm. And the .com one was super fast, and you saw a lot of short sales and downward pressure on the prices, mm-hmm. because they were over leveraged. I mean, you had people at 3% down, 5% down,
or 100% down,
100% financing.
They were, and they lost their jobs. They literally couldn't.
So you had a market where you had a huge section of the inventory that just had to get unloaded at whatever the lowest price is. That's not the case now.
No.
I mean, people are still a lot of all cash, huge down payments, 30%, 50% down. Yeah. And people are not, if the prices dip a little bit, they're not going to just unload their property at whatever it's going to sell for. They're going to wait it through.
No.
So I think you're not going to see that rapid motion on the side.
I think we're just going to, like the fall, I think what we will see is just more inventory, which makes,
And an adjustment to balance out a little bit more between buyers and sellers.
In terms of numbers of offers, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also think that if the market does see a 5 to 10% correction, frankly, there are a lot of buyers sitting there kind of waiting for that. And I don't see it going a whole lot further down. Ask me a year down the road and see what I think. But I'm feeling pretty convinced now that we're not going to see a major adjustment in prices.
No, because I think here in San Francisco, those rising interest rates really don't affect these buyers that much.
We are definitely
because of the cash situation.
We are in a unique market here. We have to remember that when we're looking at the statistics, and if they're even statewide or national,
they don't apply.
They don't apply to our San Francisco markets
as much. I mean, it's psychologically, I think, and that's always the case when you have a shifting market. I mean, 50% of what you're dealing with people is the psyche. They get nervous. When the market starts, the stock market gets volatile, and you're dealing with a lot more nerves than you normally are.
So Scott from our webinar audience, sorry to cut in real quick. Scott has a question along these lines. He wants to know, how do you counter the hesitant buyer's argument that this is the top of the market and not a good time to buy, especially with inventory being low? And we're already kind of talking about this, but how would you answer that for this market?
The inventory isn't low. Is that what he's asking?
He's saying inventory is still low, so it seems to be some discrepancy over that. But how would you counter the argument that it's the top of the market and not a good time to buy?
I think that it's the top of the market
now.
Yeah.
How do I deal with that?
I mean,
what are they basing that on?
I mean, there's already been a softening in prices.
Yeah,
I would actually argue back that I think maybe we saw the height of the market in some segment 6 months ago to a year ago. And that we are not going to see much more of an adjustment. I think Noe Valley is a prime example. You look back, it looks like it dropped 6 or 7% this last year. The Sunset hasn't changed a whole lot, but there has been some drop there too. And
the job numbers of the Bay Area are just super strong.
And we've got a lot coming in.
When you get when you get hesitancy from a buyer, though, I think one of the main things that needs to be discussed is, why are you buying a home? Because if what you're expecting to do is to buy a home and that's an investment for you, has nothing to do with where you live, you don't even care if you live there or not, then maybe that's a good argument that, we're at the top of the market, maybe you should wait 5 or 6 years. But if what you intend to do is get out of your rental and move into your home and set some roots down, then arguably there is no bad market.
That's right.
Because
Good eyesight.
I've met people
Yeah.
on numerous occasions that
Or a bad
who
time.
have bought always at the top of the market, and then 15 years later, their equity is so great that it doesn't even matter.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's important to know how long they're going to hold on to that property, and if they're going to hold on to it for 5 to 7 years.
And my advice to most buyers, or almost all buyers, that are going to live in the home, I tell them, plan on 5 to 7 years, because you may see a downturn. It happens. I've seen it happen, et cetera. But that should be your, if you're moving next year, I'd recommend you not buy.
Well, and any buyer getting in these days, it's like we talked about, putting down so much money that they're not putting themselves in a position where they're going to have to sell. If the market's not good, just hang on to it. And most buyers,
Well,
this time
yeah,
can do
except
that.
somebody, a lot of people, like the couple I have now that moved to Boston with 3 kids. They don't want to rent their property and manage
Well,
it.
they have to make a decision, I suppose.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you don't have to sell it in a bad market, why? Just hang on to it.
Right.
That's right.
Wait for another time.
So we're all in agreement that there's something shifted. There's some change that's happening in the marketplace right now. So what, if anything, are you thinking about doing in your business, changes that you would make?
We heard strategy. Well, what other practical things are you doing?
Well, one thing that I just did that I haven't done before that was very interesting is I have a new listing coming up in Noe this week, and I generated my CMA back in late October, early November, and about mid-December, maybe beginning to mid-December, I took my seller around to show her what properties were currently on the market so that we could keep track of them, not just telling her about it, but I wanted her to see them. So we went around on tour. We looked at, these properties. Interestingly enough, a few of them did not sell. And it happened, they took them off the market. They didn't expire. They were, so to speak, on hold now.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I think a year or two ago, I think those properties would have just sold just like that, regardless of whether it was after the holidays, before the holidays, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that was a good thing to do with my client.
Great
Because
idea.
her expectations were to reach like 3 million when we're listing, at 2,695. And I said, no, I want you to list it where you're going to accept, offers around this price. And so they came to terms with that. And
Yeah, you can't make a living off of listings that don't sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for anybody, as you know.
No.
It doesn't work for the seller.
And yeah, the seller gets angry at you because
Well, and they're frustrated
You
because
haven't
they
sold
have a
their property.
reason to sell. They need to move on.
Yeah.
I mean,
so there had been a few reductions in the meantime, which I sent them, and she had seen the property, and that
exactly.
really helped.
that was a good
So you're
thing for
doing
them.
more market education with
Yes.
your, like hands-on with your seller.
I think also
We're sending them out to open houses.
Yeah.
That's
But
what
I
I've
like
been
to
doing.
go with them because then I go with each property and tell them the pluses and minuses and compare it to their properties right there as they're seeing the property.
I also think more than ever, I do this with almost every listing anyway, but when the market's a little bit more unpredictable, is having other agents, and not just from Zachary, but from other brokers
Yeah,
come
that's
through
a
that
good
I
idea.
really kind of lean on for pricing advice. And I share
Great idea.
per their emails with the seller saying, hey, this is my competition, but we all work together. This is what they're saying about the value of your property. And it really helps to have that more neutral. third party.
And more input from agents.
Yeah.
Other,
Absolutely.
everybody, and particularly if they
Yeah.
are familiar with where you're
Yeah.
listing.
Neighborhood, yes.
Well,
definitely.
worst comes to worst, you cannot be afraid, frankly, to walk away from a listing if it's going to be
No.
overpriced. I did that a lot in 2009, and I would say I think all but one of them did not sell. And the one that did sell, they got a little bit lucky, or I was wrong. Actually, either way, and you really do have to be willing to walk away.
Well, and typically when there's a seller that's uncooperative with realistic pricing, there's a reason. They're not motivated.
They're not motivated.
And so if you have actually investigated the motivation of the seller, what you're finding is, well, I don't really have to sell. I'm in no rush. And if you start hearing things like that, then maybe it's time to walk away and say, well, you can keep your house at $3 million because I can only sell it
Right.
for 2.6.
And the interesting thing that my client did after showing her other properties, she insisted that her property looked the best that
Right.
it can.
Right.
So all of the minor repairs that needed to be done in the past couple of years, we would say, just let it go. today is like she was really there, making sure that everything was done
That's
and
definitely
shown
an
in
adjustment.
its best light as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, I did that with both of the people now, that where we had to do some repair. I mean, one of them, they just didn't want to do anything, other than a few repairs. And I said, you got to paint this. I said, and I just put my foot down about it. I just said, this is going to make a huge difference in terms of how it looks.
Do you
how it
spell
looks.
out for them what the difference will be?
In terms of a price?
Yeah, without a change, this would be the price, and with the change, this would be the price.
Sometimes it depends. In this case, I just basically said, why would we want to stage? This is how I presented it this way. I didn't want to put a dollar figure on it because, I didn't feel really comfortable doing that. I basically said, why are you going to stage this? And it put all this beautiful furniture around, and then we have scratches on the walls. I mean, think about that. If you walk in here as a buyer and you see that, it's like, it looks like you didn't care about the property, or it wasn't taken care of.
And what else is wrong with it besides what I'm seeing?
Correct.
I think it's hard to put a price or like.
Yeah, I'm very leery about doing that.
But I think
you'll hit 25,000 more if you do this. I'm leery about
the
that.
most important thing is to rule out any possibility of why you didn't get multiple offers or why it didn't go up to where to do the best that you can and give it a budget and then you feel like you've done it all. And
to your point, Nadia, it may not be about getting a higher price. It may be about getting it sold.
Getting it
So
sold.
not everything's
Exactly.
going to sell.
Right, exactly.
Taking away any objection you can, of course, is a positive with any listing.
Now, if you get a seller who wants a price that's a little higher than you think is a reasonable price for the property, so you're very close, how do you deal with that?
Well, I haven't had that happen. I mean,
Well,
what do you mean
one of
what do you
the-
mean
one-
close?
Yeah,
I mean, that's really.
I mean, if you thought the property was worth in the mid 600s, or let's say,
we have a garage.
some little number.
Mid 6. Are you back in 1990?
I meant 6 million. I don't
Just
know.
back from vacation.
Right.
When I used
Like
to
a
deal with
200,000.
price reductions, I used to think about 5 to 10%. That would be a price reduction that might actually open some eyes and say, hey, I saw that house and I might be interested in that. So if you had somebody that was, close to 5% off of what you,
Sure.
I mean, one of my rules of thumb as a listing agent was that I wouldn't list it if it was over 10% higher than mine.
Yeah. I think, again, that's communication ahead of time with the seller. You say, okay, we have a difference of opinion here, but I'm going to do everything I can to get you the price you want. But we had this conversation. I'm telling you, I think it's probably not going to sell for that. And in about 3 weeks down the road, we're going to have this conversation again and talk about a price adjustment. And I think as long as you've had that conversation ahead of time with the seller you feel is being a little bit too aggressive, maybe on their wishes.
Well, the other question to ask him too is, other than, I understand this is what you want,
Right, show me something.
but give me some evidence, because I'm showing you the comps,
Right.
which is evidence. Give me some evidence of why someone, other than, you think this is what, it should sell for, or this is what you want, of why we should price it here. So.
Have any of you used a method of establishing a price reduction in writing prior to
No.
moving forward?
No.
Because I've talked to realtors that have done that, and I think it's
What
an
do
interesting approach.
They say after 2 months.
There's an
we'll reduce it
addendum to
75.
the listing agreement that says that if it hasn't sold in 3 weeks, that we agree that there will be a 5% price reduction.
I've never.
Charlie, you have a question?
Yeah, why wouldn't you have that conversation, that pre-price reduction question or conversation with any listing rather than turning it down? Why wouldn't you at least take the listing?
With the idea that
get
you
your buyers
reduce
through
it?
and then 3 weeks later have that conversation?
I think it probably depends on the delta and where
Sure.
they think it's going to sell. If I just really don't, if I don't think it's going to sell for anywhere near what they expect, 2 things. I feel like I'm wasting both of our time and I'm not being honest with the seller about what their expectations are, and I can't do that. I think it would be better if they work with somebody else.
Go
Maybe
for it.
somebody who told them what they wanted to hear, and then when they find out they're wrong, come back and get the list later.
I think when you list a property below what they're expecting, a little bit below, you tell them you're going to do everything to expose it as much as you can. You're going to bring every buyers are educated.
Yes.
If it's really worth that, you will get an offer at that price. If it's not worth that, because if it's a property that's desirable, yes. But if it's a property that's going to have a few negatives, then I would, be a little bit more careful.
Mhm.
So it really depends on the property and the neighborhood.
I heard a saying once that you want to be the first kiss, the second spouse, or the third realtor. And that whole thing revolves around the fact that if you've got a listing that somebody wants too much money for, then it's going to sit on the market, and the first realtor is not going to be able to sell it, and they're going to get burned. And then they're going to bring in somebody else, and then the second realtor is going to maybe stick with the same price and try to sell it and not sell it. And then the third realtor walks in the door and says, now let's get realistic. And not only that, I want a 6% commission. And the seller agrees. They give you the price reduction and the increased commission because they want to sell their house.
Well, that's great if that works out in reality. Usually, but if you're
I live in a different world.
yeah, right. Back in the 1990s again. What that tells me if you're the third realtor, it's like these are difficult people to work with.
They're not motivated enough.
Maybe not.
I had a listing back in the day on Daharo Street. I had it for a year and expired. Super nice.
Did I get it?
No. Mary Lace got it.
Oh.
She sold it in a week.
Beat me out. Yeah, okay.
I've had that happen too.
Oh, God, that's painful.
But yeah, definitely at least being the second realtor sometimes is the right place to be. Let them get beaten up. So.
Anyway.
Okay, we talked about differences in how we deal with our sellers. How about differences in how we deal with our buyers? What do you do different in a market that's shifting like the one we've got today? How do we deal with our buyers? And we actually touched on it. We talked about, what do you say to a buyer that says, why should I buy now? This is the top of the market. But what other things do we do with our buyers in terms of preparing their expectations, what we do practically in terms of how do we handle their seeing property, and what things should we be considering?
Well, for me, I just met a new client this past weekend, and when I sat with him, building trust and really feeling like letting them know how ethical of a person you are, that you're not going to, you're really going to look out for their best interest in looking at properties with them, is really, I think, essential. And what I'm doing more than I used to is really actually going out with them and looking at properties a little longer than I used to. And that's how I established that trust with them, because they've gone around and talked to people. They've been at open houses. They've seen other agents and all that. You really want to stand out with them so that you build that relationship early on. And so they feel like, okay, I think I trust what she or he is telling me based on what she's shown me, and here are the properties, and she's steering me away from the ones I shouldn't because either they're priced too high or they're not exactly going to work for me. And I talk a lot about resale value. That when I sell a property, even though this particular client, when I was showing him properties, they were a little bit larger or they had things that he didn't need at this point in time. But I said, if you can afford it now, do it, because if you're thinking of selling this in 5 years, you want a property that has parking. You may want a property that's top floor condo, a little larger. If you can't afford it now, do it. And he thought it made perfect sense. So just educating, spending more time, and really having it. Because I think in the past, a lot of agents have sent their clients, made a list for them, send them, when you find something, let me know, and I'll be there to see it with you. And I think that has to change.
Some of that's a byproduct from just how marketing is done now too.
Yeah, I find most of the buyers, I don't work with a lot of buyers, but the buyers that I've worked with, they kind of don't want me there.
Yeah.
They want to go out on their own. And that's really what, I offer.
Even in the beginning, initially?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
They're much more educated. They, at least the buyers I've worked with, they seem to know more what they like and what they want. Mm-hmm. Then once they see something they like, and then I've either seen it or I'll go see it, then we have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where they're looking for me to negotiate for them. And that's kind of what I've told my buyers. It's like, I can, my talent for you, or my the reason you want to work with me is I can negotiate.
Yeah.
And that's what they want. They want to know, I think, you can negotiate the best price for them. And I think in this market that's even more relevant to promote to them. They may know what they like. They may, and they are pretty educated about, properties and locations and what's around them and what's that. But what they don't know is how to negotiate. And the other promo that I've always said is, I've been around for a while, so I know the agents, and I know who not to work with and who to believe and who not to believe, and kind of what to look out for. And that is important to them. Yeah. Because they don't know.
Well, this particular client that I met, I'd never met him before, and I didn't know where he came from. If he was a referral, I think it would have been something different. But what was really interesting about this particular client is that I encourage him to start looking right now, like before the Super Bowl starts, because a lot of people are into watching. Well, first of all, they haven't gone over, I think, the holidays. They're still, busy. But I encourage him to start looking, even though there's not as much properties. I think that he could probably not be in as much of a multiple offer situation as if he waited in the spring. February, March, we're going to see a lot more properties come on the market. So he actually liked that I mentioned that, and he's,
Because I'm seeing more inventory on the market right now than I normally do in January. Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I've done.
I think things
I've
that didn't
always,
sell last year
with buyers, no matter what the market, I've always told them that for me, really to understand both emotionally and physically what turns you on about a house, I need to see you react to a few. And so I really do try to go out at least once with a new buyer to see whether it's 3 or 4 homes, whatever it might be.
Right.
But let them lead the way. If they do you want to continue seeing properties with me, if they do, I'm going to make time to do it. Many of them don't want to.
They don't want me around.
Yeah, but beyond that, it's really just being very, very blunt about issues you see with a home.
Sure.
That's part of the trust building.
Yep.
And you can't be shy about that because buyers love it. They love it when you say,
oh, yeah.
This is something that's wrong with the house. It's not an end all, but yeah, it's gonna cost you some money. But as long as you're aware of that, you'll be fine. And you just have to reassure them again as you go along. But don't be afraid to tell them there's something wrong with the house. That's just
absolutely
a huge mistake.
Yeah. This probably is not a good property for this reason.
Exactly.
And I had a client last fall that has been totally unrealistic about what she's wanted for the price that she was willing to pay. And I finally I just said to her, look, this is not going to happen. You're not going to be able to compete. So look at properties that may not be exactly what you want and that, have been on the market for longer and have not sold, have been withdrawn, whatever. Let's start looking at those and see what it is that you can change in them in the future or make repairs or make them what you want and get a better price or a price that you can afford rather than trying to reach for something that's, that's not going to work. So that's been helpful in working with this particular buyer, and she's actually doing that right now. Yeah.
One of the things that occurs to me that is a characteristic of a changing market that we haven't talked about is appraisals. Because one of the things that happens is appraisers, when they sense that there's been a market change, begin to become much more conservative about their valuations of properties. So it makes it much more critical that a buyer is pre-approved and has some margin in their ability to purchase so that they can get through an appraisal that might be a little bit lower than what you'd like it to be.
And sometimes that presents an opportunity to negotiate.
Yes, it does.
If you have that condition. That's where you have to be careful about your offer. If you put in no contingency offer.
Well, let's talk about that. In writing offers in a changing market, one of the things that changes is how we write our contract.
That's right.
What's Denver's policy?
Well, back in the 1990s.
We had 10 contingencies.
Yeah.
But I think you have to think about that now. How are you going to write your offers? Which is even more crucial for you to know, what your buyers can handle, because if they're getting a loan, okay, what if the that's a conversation I have with regardless, even when the market's hot. I go, look, even when the market's hot, sometimes you get some kind of appraiser that just is conservative. So can you handle And I think if they're working with a loan broker that and I will ask them the question, how flush are they? If perhaps the appraisal comes in low, can they handle
It'll
it?
make up the difference.
Yes.
Right.
And I think, so working with a good loan agent, so they tell their clients, in terms of what their parameters are. But the other thing is, how do we look at writing an offer?
So, Jeff, I think Melinda had a question. Can you see that? And
Yeah, I can. She the question was already addressed. She wanted to know, do you feel the inventory is coming on earlier already this year? There was a big office tour last Wednesday, she mentioned.
More inventory. I see more inventory this January than I normally see.
so, I mean, back in a different market, buyers always had inspections.
Yeah.
And even if the seller provided you pre-inspection,
You still have
the buyer still have inspections.
That's right.
They would choose to either get a different inspector to get a new set of eyes on it, or they might even just bring the same inspector back, so at least they get a report, that they have recourse back to. But that all speaks to the buyer understanding what they're purchasing and not having the surprises post-close.
And Melinda's follow-up question is along those lines. She asks, is a full packet still very important?
Yes.
Yes.
No, absolutely.
Always. Always.
Only if you want to keep the deal together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the more information you give out to that buyer, the better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, any listing agent that's successful is going to make sure that even more so now that the buyer has actually
Everything
read through
in front of them. Yeah.
approved everything that you have.
Absolutely.
And I'm still doing pre-listings, home inspections and past inspections.
Yeah.
I feel
On homes. I don't necessarily do them on condos.
No, not on single family.
Yeah, single family.
I still
Yeah.
do home inspections on condos, but not pests.
Do you? On all of them?
Yeah.
Even in the bigger buildings?
Even in the bigger buildings, just
Yeah.
to have it. Yeah.
I haven't done that so far, but.
Maybe you could share some of your wisdom, because you guys have been through some market fluctuations, about what you would advise agents who have not been through what you guys have been through in terms of a strong seller's market shifting. There are agents who have only been in the market for, we've been in this current market place for 7 to 10 years. And so for anybody who's joined the business in that period, they've never known anything but what we've been experiencing in the last 7 to 10 years. And so the question is, what would you share with them? What kind of advice would you give them about how to deal with the changes?
Welcome to real estate. But I just remember, the first downturn, because I sold in 79, 80, and then 81 interest rates went to 16 or 17%. And we couldn't sell anything. But the first 2 years, my first 2 years in the business, I said, oh, this is easy. I mean, I sold a house right off my open house, the first one I did. So, but I had to learn. The first thing I would tell them is you're going to have to be much more diligent in terms of, paying attention to details, et cetera, et cetera. And, just plan to work longer, harder, longer hours.
In the last
you're gonna work
downturn, we
hard.
had this same kind of meetup, and I remember that this was a sage piece of advice that just remember that you're going to have to work harder.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's just harder. It takes longer, and to get something done or complete something.
Yeah, I mean,
Normally, you could get lucky, but you in this market you just work harder.
I think, a lot of agents, and I was probably guilty as charged through one of the downturns, is you don't, again, acknowledge there's a change coming, or there may be a change coming, and prepare for that further ahead of time. Actually, this time I've already started doing a few things, starting a couple months ago, with not just buyers, but sellers, to keep them more up to date, hopefully, on the market. But also I've started doing some additional marketing things I haven't done in the past around my neighborhood, reaching out more to potential sellers, that sort of thing, investing more money while I have it, while the money's still coming in. Right. So sometimes you think, well, I should be pulling back and not spending money, and you got to have money set aside for, of course, survival. But you do have to keep on reaching out to clients and keep the marketing going.
On that note too, it's like, and I'm, one thing this market definitely, this kind of market teaches, when you're making a lot of money, it's easy to, do things, et cetera. And that is what's crucial, particularly for us that are self-employed. You need to manage your money. People that are first in the business. The first thing I've always told them, if I've mentored them or talked to them, make sure you have 6 months, reserves, and manage your money. It's even more crucial now for you to manage it. So you're not in a situation where you're desperate.
Right.
Pay your quarterly taxes. That was one of the first things Randall told me.
Yeah. But people pick up on desperation, very quickly. So
we become lesser realtors when we're desperate for the next commission.
Exactly. And you don't want to. It's hard enough as it is. Don't make it harder.
For me, I'm kind of also doing something different that I haven't done before. I feel like, people would come to me and I would tell them what I could do for them. I'm not waiting for that. I'm like reaching out to my client base, buyers, sellers, and giving them information. So I'm educating myself about all the changes that have occurred in the laws last year. I mean, there's a lot of people who are still confused about what's really going on. And now that I have all the answers, but I'm giving them now the resources of people to go to get informed, because that's going to help them make a decision whether they should buy or not, sell or not, depending on what, how the market is changing and how the laws are changing, tax-wise or anything like that. So giving people more information, educating yourself, taking the time to really read more, look at the listings, talk to people, look at your network and see who's in that position now I'm working a lot with baby boomers. So like, for instance, I was very involved in my son's schools so I've kept all those rosters and I'm like calling these families and how are your kids doing? Because some of them are at an age where they're looking to buy. So, I'm reaching out to my network a little bit more than I used to and that kind of thing. So,
have you felt like in prior downturns that there was a demand for you to be flexible about what kind of work that you wanted to do? Because I think one of the things that we tend to do is we say, especially if we've been in the business a long time, well, I love listings, so I'm just going to do listings. Oh. But when the market starts to slow down a little bit, you don't have as many choices.
You have to work with both. I mean, your buyers are going to become your sellers in 5 years.
You always want to work with buyers, serious buyers, obviously.
Yeah.
You always want to have I'd say my business is more listings than buyers, but I like working with buyers.
I'm about 60-40, and last year I worked a lot with buyers. I didn't have as many listings, but I found that very, very rewarding.
Yeah, I did too. I had more buyers.
It gave me time to have my free weekends and I just, or whatever.
It's just the way it worked out.
It's a different,
right?
Yeah, it was a different year because of it, and I enjoyed it.
If I go back and look at my best quarters, it's usually when there's a pretty balance between the two, buyers and sellers.
And I think that's probably, we're not talking about today about a shift from a seller's market to a buyer's market.
No.
What we're talking about is a shifting market.
More even.
So it's more even.
Yes.
It's not.
Good.
It's a great market to be in.
It's an even market, much more, which is healthy.
And even though I'm doing like inspections, I want my buyers to be able to, call these inspectors and see if they can do a walkthrough with them, and really get to know the properties and. I think
educate themselves.
And I think listing agents and sellers are more open to that than they were before.
And I think the other advice to buyers, the newer agents. And I think they're doing this, but this is a great time to be doing open houses. With other agents that will let you, or what, because I usually always, especially if I have condos, I always want, in a bigger building, I want somebody at the front door and so I always work, if you get a buyer out of this, great, but this is a great time for them because a lot of these young, people coming in, they don't have buyers. They don't have agents. So it's a great opportunity to start meeting some buyers.
Richard in our chat had that exact question. Are there any other tips from the panel on for an agent just getting started? He has about 6 months on the ground as a new agent, and for members of being of a previous downturn, do you have any words of wisdom for a new agent just ramping up?
It's wisdom, but do as many open houses. That's what I did when I was first in the business. I still do as many open houses as you can.
Yeah. I would say also to find out and to really get to know who you are and who you want to work with. I think that's really important, because when I first started out, I had no idea who my clients were going to be. I was just out there doing open houses, talking to people.
They were breathing, right?
And, at the time, people wanted to have like a grandmother around who was going to take them by the hand and just show her around and be able to, nurture them and do it. Today, I think you have to, if you're young and if you have peers that you socialize with, or that you are around and they feel comfortable with you and you can talk your language, I think that's really important. Reach out to your peers and let them know that you're in the business. Let them know what you're doing. Educate them, regardless of whether they need a house or not. Just talk.
You might know somebody that does.
Because they'll always know somebody that does and will refer you. So it's, I think, important to know who your client base is going to be.
This is a bit of a company person thing to say, but Zephyr agents, sucking up to Randall. Really reach out to your agents, and Zephyr really does have a great agent community.
Yeah.
And just by staying in touch, socializing, hanging out at the office. And when my first year at the company, I was probably in the office mostly 7 days a week. My wife started to wonder what was going on until the first few sales happened.
And she was right. No.
But and hang out with agents that frankly are optimistic, agents that you like. Business comes about, and people say, "Oh, by the way, my listing, I've got this buyer that I really don't have that time to work with. Would you like to work with?" And that stuff happens. It just
not if you're not there.
If you're not there, it does not happen.
Or they don't know you.
Yeah.
Or,
exactly.
who you are.
Get to know the other agents in this company, because they are a huge resource.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid of older listings too. Right? If we get in a market where things are still a little bit longer, the buyers that are actively looking and have agents are coming through those first 2 weeks. You get to week 3, 4, 5, 6.
More buyers. Yep.
You've got a lot fewer people coming through, but there's a lot more unrepresented buyers.
Yes.
And you have more time to spend with them and bond with them.
Yep.
So
That's good.
Yeah, the objective is not to sell that house.
Yeah.
The objective is the buyers, the unrepresented buyers.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
All right, and this next question comes a little bit back to our conversation about inspections, but Courtney asks, I still haven't seen a return to inspection conditions for properties in core locations. It still seems nearly impossible to get an offer accepted in a competitive situation. Do you agree or have any feedback about that changing?
I mostly agree, but what I've done a lot, especially the last 6 months to a year, is forewarned my buyer clients that they're going to either have to pay for another inspection prior to, if the agent will allow it, or barring that, a walkthrough inspection with the provided report, assuming that it's a good inspector.
Exactly.
Or be willing to walk away. And that's a hard one, but really you just have to, it's about prepping the buyer, just saying, this is going to be competitive. Let's see if we can't get a walkthrough inspection prior to, or get you in touch with the inspector.
Especially if I get this package and I know the agent or the inspectors.
Yeah.
If I know, I see something from Lindgren or whatever. I mean, that's a reputable company, et cetera. So, my advice at that point would have to do a walkthrough, with whoever did the inspection.
Great. That's all we have for the moment.
great.
Any questions in our audience here? Yeah, Isabel.
I do have a question. I'd be curious to have your opinion on it. And thank you for sharing about, your personal opinion on this market. So as the market normalizes, we're going to see more and more sellers who bought at the height, and we're going to be selling at a loss, or at least not making money.
Right.
And so I've had a couple of agents ask me to say, well, what should we do about commission? Because when they are past clients with homework work and we really care for it, makes us sick in our stomach when they are, losing money because we feel like we let them down. So should we discount the commission, or because it's a more challenging market and it's going to take longer to sell the property, should we make the commission in fact higher because it's going to be a lot more work? So I've heard both, and I'd be curious to have your opinion.
So to repeat this question, it revolves around sellers who purchased in the last couple, 3 years that are not going to make money. And in fact, with transfer taxes and with real estate commissions, they may be losing money. And how do we deal with them in terms of our commission rates?
Well, I just had that situation. I didn't sell them the property, but they won't make any money. They bought it 3 years ago, and paid a top dollar for it. So after commissions and the work that we're doing to get it on the market, they won't make any money, et cetera. But for me, I mean, basically, I won't go below 5%. I just don't. I don't. I'm worth that. No, and I didn't. I can't control the market. So it's either they choose to list it, and sell it now at the price that we think it will go at, that's real. And I mean, I said, how I phrased it, I said, commissions in San Francisco are 5 to 6%. Given your situation, I'm happy to do, this is okay to do for 5. I think they felt good about that. They thought, well, okay, she's going to do it at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So
I haven't done
that's how I presented
I haven't
it.
done a below 5% listing for a client before, but what I have done is if they're purchasing something else or if they're going somewhere else, I have forgone my referral fee. And asked the other agent just to give them a credit for closing costs on something they were doing. So otherwise,
I see. Okay.
I've really never given in on less than a 5% commission rate, except for a very, very, very high-end listing one time.
I just had a very good client of mine who just who really liked me and still does, and was thinking of going to Redfin to save on their commission. And they were buying another house in San Francisco Woods, and they thought that maybe they would go with an agent who knew the area, but I was able to convince them that that person was mostly a listing agent, and if I was to represent them as a buyer's agent, they would get a better service from me, which they agreed. So they went, but that was with the understanding that I would sell their property at a discount. And I don't usually do this, but the fact that I was also selling them on both, I was doing both sides.
You're getting 2 deals, yeah.
Then they felt better, and they know how hard I work for them, so they were okay with that. But usually, no, I like Susan and Kim, I don't like to lower my commission.
I agree, because if you're reason we set the bar, it's
I don't want to change the bar.
No,
yeah.
we already
We've
have.
set that precedent because
Exactly.
I've had instances in the past where I know agents that have done that.
They don't pay us 10% when they did really, really well.
Right. Exactly.
And we get paid to do a particular job. As an industry, it's really interesting. National averages, when the discounting happens in a hot seller's market, when we get out of the hot seller's market, the discounting stops and the average commission goes up. Because it's more work.
It's harder.
More work.
Exactly. And also, it's how you educated your clients when they bought their property. That's really important to have that conversation, to really verbally, yes, you buy it and be prepared that if you sell before 5 or 7 years, you may not recoup the cost of what you paid, because of the time that you purchased your property.
Well, and also if they're looking for
Yes, remember, it's their decision.
Yeah.
And not your fault.
When they make really big money.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's really so.
Also, if you're discounting commission, you have to remind them that you're splitting that commission, of course. And are you going to offer a buyer's agent less than 2.5%, send out all sorts of red flags?
No.
You're not going to do that as a
And you're not going to work for 1 or 2, 1.5. No,
Right.
ain't happening.
One of the things that occurs to me when we're talking about this is that one of the things that I've experienced in changing markets where things are slowing down and calming down is that it becomes more critical that we tell the hard truth to our clients.
Absolutely.
Because especially when it comes to pricing, because if we feel badly and sympathetic for them, there's a tendency to want to agree, okay, fine, we'll list it at this price that's an unrealistic price, when in fact probably it's a much better course to tell them the truth now, to be clear now about what the pricing is, because my experience is that if you don't tell the truth on pricing, if you sugarcoat it and take a higher price and it doesn't sell, you are going to get blamed for the fact that the property didn't sell.
Right.
It's not the pricing, it's the marketing, it's you. And so better to tell the truth and better to be open and clear.
And
with
you
the
have
clients.
to have the cards fall where they do when you tell the truth.
Yep.
You know, if they don't want to hear it, they want to hear somebody else tell them what they want to hear, so be it.
Somebody else can take the first shot and not sell it.
Whatever.
That's right. And then you can be the second builder.
Or the third.
Or the third. It gets it at the right price.
Yeah.
And it's-
No, it's not worth it.
No, trust and
Never
ethics are very important.
Any other questions?
So Randall and I would like to thank Susan, Nadia, and Ken for joining us today. And thanks for everybody for zooming in. And I hope, I know I learned some stuff today. I hope you guys did.
Yes.
Always.
And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for
All right.
having
Give 'em a
us.
hand.
Thank you.